I'm going to show you 9 of the most powerful sales hacks I've used to generate millions for my clients. These psychological strategies are so powerful that some people might even say they are borderline manipulative. So remember, with great power comes great responsibility, and let's dive in. The first strategy is going to be the rags to riches story. When it comes to selling anything, you have to understand people buy emotionally, not logically. So storytelling is one of the most powerful ways to get someone emotionally driven to take an action. So using the rags to riches story, basically when you're selling something, people are buying into you, right? Whether you're selling a product or service, whatever the case is, or maybe some kind of transformation. So the rags to riches stories works by creating a story. You definitely want to use a real story of where you started. So for example, right, if I am selling courses on how to help people become a better seller, I would start with, when I was growing up, I was this loser, shy, quiet kid that always played video games. I had a hunchback and, none of the girls liked me, right? Which is actually a true story. So when you start from the rags, then you go from the riches. Okay, so how did I go from this shy, awkward, quiet kid to becoming who I am today? And so as you tell that story, you want to have obstacles, challenges, things that set you back. So when I tried to, read different books and talk to people, at first it felt very awkward and weird and everybody made fun of me for trying, but I just kept going and going and going, and I didn't let anyone tell me what I could or couldn't do. And so you see, by putting these obstacles and challenges in front of me and I'm overcoming them, it tells this grander story that's much more relatable, because chances are, if you're telling this kind of story and the type of people you're listening to probably relate to your rags to riches stories in some way, because they are watching you and listening to you or looking to buy something from you, and they want to be like you. And the more relatable you can make yourself to your ideal customer, the more likely they are to buy, because they're going to think, wow, if Patrick can do it, then I can do it too. And in a way, by telling this story, you are in a way inspiring them to become a better version of themselves, right? So you can't say, yeah, it's manipulative, but you can also call it really good storytelling. And if you look at Hollywood movies or some of the best influencers out there, they all have this ability to tell powerful stories. Now, the next strategy I have for you is to throw rocks at your enemies. Now, there's a common quote that says, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." So what does that mean here? So when you're selling something, typically somebody's trying to reach some kind of transformation, right? So if you're selling consulting or coaching, you're basically taking someone from point A to point B. Now, to get to point A to point B, there's going to be lots of obstacles, right? So if you're helping somebody make $10,000 per month, for example, and right now they're only making $0 a month, right? Then you're saying, okay, let's get you to become a better person. Let's develop your skills. Let's get you to put yourself out there and try to make some money. And as they go through that process, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of haters. Oh, you can't do it. Oh, you can't start an online business. Oh, I tried it myself. It didn't work. So if it didn't work for me, what makes you think it's going to work for you? Because of this natural tendency for people to be haters, you got to throw rocks at their enemies. So if I was selling this type of coaching program, I would say, hey, look, like when I started making content, everyone was talking negative things about me. They said I couldn't do it. They said that I didn't have enough sales experience. They said this and that. But you know what? I didn't listen to what they said. I just continued to put out video after video and video, and I created a community, an audience that actually liked my stuff. So yes, maybe one person might be a hater, but the reality is there's a lot of people that are going to love you as well, right? And so what I'm doing, I'm throwing rocks at the enemy. So if I'm telling this story to another person, let's say they are also a aspiring creator like I was in the beginning, they're going to feel a lot more relatable to me because I just went through what they went through as well. And so whatever it is you're selling, you want to be on the side of your potential customer and throw rocks at their enemies. Who are their haters? Who are the people that are telling them they cannot do it? And that is your common enemy. Now, the next strategy that we have for you is going to be called the pit of darkness. Now, this is going to be a powerful storytelling technique where when you're telling any type of story, you want to dramatize or make it very clear on how low you're going. For example, if you're telling a story where you're saying, hey, I try to start my own business. I put in thousands of dollars of all the money I saved up in my life. And you know what? It was just failure after failure after failure. And when I got to the point where I was down to my last $200, this is where everything changed. And then you tell a story of how you turned it around, right? So when you're telling your story and you're convincing someone to buy something, especially if you're selling a transformational program, for example, like a coaching or consulting, you have to draw out the worst pains of how bad can it be? How bad can it get? When your back is against a wall, when you're down to your last dollars, when you don't know what to do next, and there's no one there to help you, what is your next move? And people are so curious to understand what did you do, right? What is it that you did that got you out of that hole? And they might even feel, damn, I'm in that hole too. Like, I need to know what you did so I can do it for myself. And that's how you tell these stories in order to persuade someone to, one, relate to you, and number two, to show them that it's possible, right? Assuming you're selling something that actually works, then it is actually possible if they follow the same steps. And so when you create this distance between this bottom of the pit of like how bad things can be, and you later on tell them how you overcame some obstacles, and then you reach the end goal, that distance between where you started and where you ended up is going to be extremely wide and is going to look very impressive. If you did the opposite and said like, yeah, I was always good, and then I started a business and I made 10K a month, then I went to 100 and it was really no big deal, then it's not really relatable, right? It's like no one's going to connect with that. Where's the human touch to it? But if you said, hey, like I was doing a 9-to-5 job that I absolutely hated and I just basically quit and I used my life savings to try something out, but then for a whole year straight I was losing money after business idea, just fail, and when I was down to my last $200, so if you compare those two stories that I just told, one is like not relatable at all, one is high drama, high action, you see the contrast between where you were and where you ended up, and it's a lot more relatable. And so by creating this pit of darkness, you're going to just tell much more compelling stories, and people are going to buy into it emotionally. The next strategy I have for you is when you're trying to sell something, but maybe you're not the most qualified or you're not an expert in your field, and we're going to counter this by being an adventurer. Okay, so when you take the perspective of a adventurer, what you're doing is you're basically saying, hey, I'm on this mission, I'm on this quest to do XYZ, and I'm looking for members to come along for the ride, right? I may not know everything that I'm doing, I'm testing and trying things out. However, if you want to learn everything that I'm going through and learn from my pains, and you can just learn it right away, feel free to come along for the journey, right? So this works really well when you're learning something new and you're trying to get clients fast, right? So let's say you were trying to be an AI expert, right? But you didn't really know much about AI. Well, you could still sell clients and say, hey, look, I'm learning about how this goes. As you know, AI is a really new and emerging industry, so I'm doing my best to stay on top of the trends. So all the things that I'm learning and implement for my clients, I want to also implement for you, but understand not everything's going to work right away, but I will be there with you every step of the way to figure it out with you. Do you want to come along for the ride? And there are going to be some clients that say, no, absolutely not. It's too risky for me. But there may be other people that might say, hey, look, I don't want to figure this AI thing out by myself. If you can do it for me, I understand. Everything's not going to work out, but hey, I'll pay you money to figure it out for me. And so by taking the perspective of the adventurer, nobody can say like, oh, he's just faking, he's just pretending to be something he's not, because you never said you were this. You're just saying you're trying things out, right? And that's the ultimate protection against yourself as you are continuing to build your brand in an industry that you are continuing to learn about. And so a couple of notes on that: people will be excited to be a part of something even if it's not proven out, right? There's always these adventurers and risk takers who are going to take that risk with you. And also, even if you fail, there will be people that still support you along the way because they know you actually tried and your intention is good. So don't think you have to get everything perfect if you use the role of the adventurer. And by the way, if you are somebody that is looking to start a business, build a personal brand, and sell your skills, knowledge, or expertise online, you definitely want to join our new school community called Founder X, where you're going to learn all these things. We have free courses, free resources, weekly trainings to teach you everything you need to know about how to build your online presence and sell your skills. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check the link in the description to join our free school community. Some of the people that I've personally coached have been able to make thousands of dollars their first month working with me. So if you're interested in those kind of things, check it out. Now, my next tip is really going to be for the entrepreneurs and founders out there, and that's going to be build what they want. So here's the thing about selling. If you build something for 6 months and only then trying to sell it to another person, then what if they don't like it? What if they don't buy? Then you wasted 6 months building something nobody wants. So you want to reverse it, and you want to sell and build it, not the other way around. So how I would do it, and how I do it even now, is I'll have a meeting with somebody and I'll say, hey, look, I'm looking to build this new program. I'm going to be one of the first people if you do enroll, but I'm just curious to know like where you're currently at. Then they're going to give me where they're at, what their problems are, and I'll be like, oh, interesting, that's a problem. Lead generation. So tell me more. Like, why can't you get more meetings? They're going to say their problems. So basically, as they tell me their problems, I'm just going to reverse their problems into a solution. So I could say, hey, you mind if I share how I can help? Sure, Patrick. Well, you're saying you have trouble with lead generation. creation and you want to create content. So, I've been able to generate a lot of leads by creating these YouTube videos. So what I can do is I can teach you exactly how I did it so you can do it for yourself. What do you think about that? They're going to be like, oh, wow, that sounds pretty good. That's exactly what I needed. And so I can charge money for something like this, even though I'm just making it up out of thin air, right? This is like real time, like just doing it. And so when you're able to make these offers up just based on what somebody tells you, you can gauge quickly whether or not someone is going to pay money to buy your services. And only then, when you collect the money, then you go out and build whatever program that you had promised them, right? So this will save you a lot of time where you collect money first, then you build instead of build and then try to collect money because you don't know if it's going to work. So the next one we're going to cover is going to be social proof. Now, this is going to be one of the most powerful psychological hacks that you can use. So social proof is essentially showing proof that you got the result that you're promising to another person before they buy. Now, the best way to do this is, number one, you think about who this person is, then you go into your bank of clients that you have and you say, okay, who's the closest to this person? That way, this new prospect can feel like, oh, wow, Patrick has helped someone that was just like me. So if it worked for this person, there's a pretty high chance that it might work for me, right? No guarantees. All you really need to do is collect your case studies and present those case studies and only present the ones that are most relevant. So I've done this where if I talk about someone completely different than the person I'm trying to sell, they might say something like, yeah, your program seems good and I see it worked for them, but I don't think it's going to work for my business. I don't think it's going to work for my industry, right? But in reality, it actually might work, but because of this dissonance between who my past client was and who that case study was, they just don't see the connection, right? So that's why you always need to find the most relevant example. And the main thing you want to do when it comes to these case studies, whether it's a testimonial or a written case study or a PDF that you sent them, is you want to show the before and after. So before, what was life like before working with Patrick? How did you struggle? What were your pains? And then you talk about, okay, so what did Patrick do to help remove those obstacles? And what is your life after you work with Patrick? So before Patrick, I got no sales. After Patrick, I'm making so many sales that my problem now is delivering on the service, right? And so by creating this wide gap between where they were and where they are at now after working with you and presenting it to the client, assuming that your client is similar to the one that you're currently talking to, then it's just gonna make them feel so confident in your service, right? So social proof is one of the best psychological techniques that you gotta use. Now, the next one I have for you is gonna be called why now. So in a sale, somebody might be a really good fit for your product and service, but they may not buy now. They might say, oh, this is really good for me, but I might do it next month, but it's not really that important for me right now. So what do you need to do in order for them to take an action, right? And the key here is to use two things, scarcity and urgency. So scarcity is really just having some kind of limited supply, right? So if you are selling some kind of coaching service, you can say, hey, look, I can only take 5 clients on at a time because the quality and high touch and effort that I put into each client to transform their lives is so high, I can only work with 5. Right now we're at 4. We only got 1 more spot and there are a couple people that I'm looking to take on. However, if you're the type of person that wants to take action now, I could just bring you on and you can be the 5th, but you have to make the decision by the end of the week. And so that's creating scarcity by limiting your supply, which is limiting your time. Because it's B2B sales, you can create any scenario you want, right? If you only want to work with 5 people, you can cut it off there. If you want to work with 10, it's up to you, right? And the second thing you can do is urgency. So limiting the time at which they have to make an action, right? One of the easiest ways to do it is by discounting and by using time as the kind of like the finish line, right? So if I sold something for $5,000 and I said, hey, look, if you can make the decision by the end of the week, we're going to knock it down to 4,000, but you have to make it by the end of the week. If it's not by then, it's going to go back to 5. So if that person is qualified and they're really interested, but they just don't want to make the decision today, that discount might be the motivating factor to get them to take an action. So by limiting the supply in terms of selling your time, right? Or how many units that you have, I just think of like limited edition, like Nike sneakers, for example, right? Limited supply increases demand. And then having urgency, like you have to buy it now or else it's going to be more expensive. Combine those things together, then the person will make a decision much sooner. It doesn't guarantee it, but increase the odds. Now, the next strategy strategy is showing empathy, because people don't remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. So how do you show empathy for someone and make them feel like, oh wow, this person really gets me? I'm gonna show you some tips right now. So the first one is gonna be to actively listen. So what does this mean? When somebody's speaking to you, you want to actively listen, meaning you have to make the other person feel like you're listening, right? If you're all ears in, you're listening to every single word they're saying, but you're just like blank staring at them, they're not gonna feel it. So even if you are, it's not enough. You have to make them feel you are listening, right? So how do you do that? You basically use words as they are speaking to indicate that you are listening. So if someone's talking, I would say, yeah, I got it. Okay, well, why was that? Tell me more. So you basically use these little phrases throughout the entire conversation to actively show that every other sentence, you're actually listening to the person. Now you can do other techniques like just repeating what they said. So if they said that, oh man, like our Facebook ads aren't working anymore, I'm not sure why, and then I could repeat exactly what they said and offer a solution. Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, man. Like these days right now, it's really hard to make Facebook ads work. It's so competitive. I'm just repeating what the other person said, and they're gonna be like, oh wow, he actually gets me, right? And you can also use physical signals like nodding your head, your hand gestures, physical touch. He's like, oh man, I totally hear you, man. All these things combined together will create that sense of emotional feeling like, wow, this guy really gets me. And the reality is, it's not actually even being manipulative, to be honest. It's just showing someone you care. And by understanding all these little elements, like not everyone's a natural at being a salesperson, right? And so these are really the techniques, if you're to break it all down to steps on the things you can do to authentically care and have empathy for your customers. Now here's an advanced technique to show empathy, and that's asking questions that only makes sense if you were actually listening, right? So when you ask a question, if you reference something that they said before, and it only works by referencing, then it's gonna be so much more powerful, right? So if I just ask the person, what's your budget? Well, there's no reference to what they said before. So it could be I'm not listening to anything and randomly I just said, what's your budget? So instead, if you said, hey, you were mentioning earlier that right now the budgets are really tight for Q3 because you just bought this new software. So I was just curious for something like we're talking about, like what would the budget look like for something like this? Right? And so I'm repeating something that person said in the past, bringing it back, showing I listened, and they're going to be like, oh, wow, I said that like 20 minutes ago. I can't believe you remember that. And then they're more likely to tell me the budget because they feel like I'm actually listening and they feel like I actually care, which I actually do. Okay. Now, the next one I have for you is to seek truth. Now, this one's a little more philosophical, but it's one of the most powerful, right? I'm going to show you how to win any argument without even arguing at all. The key is you don't look to be right or wrong. Most people, they're looking to be right. They want to be like, haha, I'm right and you're wrong, which actually is very immature. So instead, you want to take a more stoic way of looking at things, right? And say like, hey, look, I'm not trying to be right. I'm not even trying to be wrong. I'm not trying to say you're right or wrong either. I'm just trying to learn what the truth is and find the best solution for the situation. It's like, how can you get mad at that, right? Because most conflict escalates because one person has an ego, the other person has an ego, and they just keep battling each other by force and trying to prove the other person is wrong. But if you just take a step back and say, look, like, I don't even care if I'm wrong, right? If you're right and your way of doing things is much better, let's go with that. That's actually much better for you because you're looking for the best possible solution. So when you're selling, you're not saying that your product is the best and this is why you're better than everybody else, or this is why you're dumb if you don't buy my thing. It's not even like that. It's more like, hey, look, I just want to understand your situation, see what you're working on, see the best solution for you, right? And if I feel like what we're doing makes the most sense, I'll let you know. I'll be honest. But if it's not a good fit, I'll also be honest and tell you as well. Like, what do you think about that? They're going to say, yeah, that sounds pretty fair to me, right? And so that's how it works, right? Seek the truth. Don't try to be right or wrong. And that completely disarms the other person. So it feels more like you're talking to a friend versus trying to battle, negotiate, or the person feels like, oh man, this guy's just trying to sell me. And the thing with looking for the truth is that you're always gonna get new information. So your opinion on something will constantly change depending on the information you get. So if you suddenly just switch your opinion on something, nobody can say, oh, he's like two-faced, he's a liar. No, it's that you have new information and you're seeking truth. So now the truth has changed based on that information, right? You can only do the best with what you have, with what you're given, okay? So this is how you win any argument, just by seeking the truth.